Okay. Sweet. So I think we had like a purpose for this when we talked about it first, but we can either go with that or we can talk about whatever is most on your mind.
Oh, I don't even remember what that purpose was.
I think because I think it had to do with some conversation about like kind of your journey kind of stepping out of the framework of Kundalini yoga and deciding to go on your own gong journey,
mm,
something like that.
yeah, sure. That sounds like a like some kind of good thread of thought for me to process
Here we go.
in front of you and other
It's
people.
therapy on a podcast.
uh, well, first of all, I'm just really grateful that um, I have a strong connection to music, and I think that has always been my practice. And I think that I was having a lot of experiences with music that, where I was losing sense of time, where sometimes I was like dissolving or really having deep energetic experiences. This is before Kundalini Yoga. This is actually what brought me to Kundalini Yoga. I was trying to understand what that was. I was like, is there some kind of state that I'm getting into? Is there some kind of, place in my consciousness that activates whenever I'm playing, music that I can just have on all the time? I'd been experimenting with psychedelics a lot when I was younger, and sort of the same thing. What's going on there whenever everything is dissolving? All these different boundaries that I'd put up. So, I think I came to Kundalini from that perspective of, self-discovery and self-exploration. And, I'd already been in a lot of different states of consciousness. I liked the fact that I could sustain it with Kundalini Yoga, where it was just sort of like, oh, here's my base level of awareness and my base level of feeling. I learned a lot from it. But I think it started getting to a point, and this is more about me than maybe anyone else, because I started. I think I would get into it, and then I'd like step back, and I think that's something that happened a lot to me over the years. But when I'd get into it, I was like really deeply into it, and the way my mind works, I want to understand how something works. I want to go into it. I want to dig into it. Um, I looked at a lot and practiced a lot of different exercises and meditations, and I tried to do it all earnestly. I tried to really go into it. Um, I think at a certain point, though, I was at Solstice and just had a really weird interaction with one of the teachers, and this was maybe in 2000 and trying to think. We just finished recording. Maybe it was in 2014,
Mhm.
and I was so turned off. Like I actually left Solstice. I just I did not want to be in the same place as this person. I felt like the negativity that was coming out of them was more than anything that I wanted to be around. And
Was it personal to you or was it just an observation of something?
it was I think personal to me, um, in a certain way. Yeah, yeah. I felt like I was getting sick actually
Yeah.
around a teacher. I felt like they were uh, sort of maybe like manipulating the world around them in a certain way to uh, suit their needs, and I didn't want to be involved in those needs. And uh, yeah, I didn't like the experience. But that sort of snapped me out of something, and then it was interesting because I was still making the the devotional music. And so I'm still touring and doing, going to concerts. But at that point, I think that I started to become more myself again. Like there was just something that was like, hey, I don't know that this is what I want to be a part of fully, And I think that that was really the only time where I had, sort of like a terrible experience with somebody. But there were just always like little things, being around different people, and I mean, it's just like you're meeting people. And I have my neuroses, and everybody has their neuroses. But I think that for me, I felt like there was more than what Yogi Bhajan said, and I feel like that mantra
There
was
was more to
really,
spirituality, you mean, than what yogi
yeah.
did?
There was more to life, and there was more to being with people, and there was more to critical thinking than necessarily what he had thought of or what he had communicated with people. uh, I think that right around that time I had met somebody who was or I'd spent a lot of time with somebody that was like older in the oops, excuse me. Let me shut that off. I thought that was not gonna-
That wasn't just like any random sound. That was high.
yeah. I like the upper octaves a lot,
Well
actually,
played.
lately. But yeah, I was talking to somebody that was there, I think, in the beginning, and had done the trips to India, and he was really just like, move away from 3HO. They're going to stifle your creativity. They're not going to be able to accept you as like your full person, and and I guess like the way things started to play out in my life was like, I just wanted people to like me for who I was and not necessarily being some kind of teacher or being some kind of model. Um, so there was a lot going on in the background, and Galena and I were having lots of discussions and lots of different interactions, but my relationship just started changing, and I think that my identity being like so wrapped up in things, I mean, like that was like, you know, it's interesting whenever you go so deep into something that you start to identify with it as a part of you, and then to start to loosen that up. I mean, I think I'm still in the process of this happening, but I think it started happening around then. I mean, like even in the training, like I already had a lot of experiences. I'd even seen other teachers. I'd had Shaktipat initiation, and so like my Kundalini was something I was already looking at. It was just a matter of the discipline that I thought was required around it.
Hmm. Is that kind of the biggest thing that you took away from teacher training was discipline, or?
Well, yeah, I think that my identity changed. I mean, I think that, and I may have mentioned this before, but like, fake it till you make it. Like, like they
Hmm.
said stuff like that a lot. And I think that had maybe in the long run a very negative impact on me. I think that it allowed me in my early teaching to create an air around me that um, maybe it wasn't actually my air. I think I put like somebody else's air on top of my air,
Yeah, yeah.
and I just wanted to do a good job, and I think for the most part I did. I definitely made some mistakes. I mean, it's a beautiful technology. I think that getting together with a group of people, breathing together, moving together, singing together, all of that is wonderful. Making meals together. Um, I don't know. I think in some ways I maybe wasn't even mature enough at the time, even though I thought I was. But
Mature enough for,
I think to like hold together a large group of people over a long period of
oh,
time.
in terms of your own teaching.
Yeah.
You know what struck me when I started to look back at times that I taught, and I didn't go deep into teaching. I taught workshops, but not like classes. But I felt like the teacher training, there was an underlying message that, you know, everything we teach you is truth, and
Hmm.
you can just say these things to your students, you know, just
Yeah.
say these things. And I looked back, and I'm at things that I would say during class. And after I decided to leave my marriage and, you know, the community I was in, um, I actually started to say things, and then I'd go, wait, is that true, or did I just pick that up from teacher training? Like, is that real? You know, like the acid bath that goes around the baby, supposedly that's a boy in the
Uh-huh.
mother's womb. Like I was explaining that to somebody, and I was like, wait, is that medically true? Or is so I don't know. And I tried looking it up. I don't know if you have the answer to that, but
I
I
don't know.
thought that,
It's not even something that I held on to.
uh,
But I
well,
mean, you know,
it didn't
I think it's
apply.
interesting, like different aspects of what are said to you as a student, or what you hold on to.
Hmm.
I mean, it's amazing to me what my students tell me that I said to them. I'm like, that's what you got out of what I said. But, that might be more on me than them, but
No, no one's hearing the same thing.
yeah. Well, and I guess that's what's going on. You're filtering it through everything else that you've experienced,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, you know, we're we went somewhere and they're essentially promoting complete lifestyle change, you know, on
Hmm.
pretty much like every single level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's interesting to look at yourself in that many ways, first of all. But then looking back, it's interesting to see how many ways you changed, or and like where you retained yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and when I started teaching the gong, the gong is really just such a useful tool for community and for consciousness. Um, you know, I had understood some of the history of the gong before Kundalini Yoga, you know, before Yogi Bhajan started sharing it. So it wasn't like a new thing. And
Hmm.
there were a lot of different traditions. So I had already understood that. And the gong, to become a very effective teacher, it asked me to be able to share a very wide view of it. So I think for my first few classes, maybe they were Kundalini centric, but then I realized that I would do much more good if I shared it from more of a universal perspective, um, and a cultural perspective, and actually could see what was happening with the Gong and Kundalini Yoga as being a part of, you know, a longer history of the instrument. You know,
Hmm.
so I think now even I'm able to look at it more as like an ethnomusicologist. Um, you know, I think that a lot of there's just like a lot of weird stuff said about the gong. There's a lot of really weird thoughts about the gong. There's a lot of superstitions around the gong.
I was gonna say that. Yeah, that was
I
really
mean, it's all
interesting
very
too.
interesting to me, you know, and to look at culturally. But I mean, a lot of it just seems like uh, people that don't really understand the instrument talking about it.
Hmm. Well,
And
again,
then,
because you were taught that you don't really need, you just need to, which was the opposite of what was said, is that you can just repeat these things. You don't need to actually, I don't know, give me an example. Like, you know, keeping your hair long, for example.
yeah,
Like, you know, just tell people that it's not a good idea to cut their hair. That's perfectly okay. You don't have to, you're just sort of, anyway. But I'm thinking, like, if Yogi Bhajan said it about the gong, then I think a teacher would feel confident in expressing that opinion.
yeah. Well, you know, he didn't really talk much about the gong from what I can tell. Um, you know, when you look at the interviews and the
Hmm.
teaching, it sort of seemed like he's like figure it out for yourself. To be honest with you, I mean, I know there is that video, but that was like one moment in time that was like captured. It doesn't seem like it was like really a gong class.
It was,
Um,
I don't know what that video
oh,
is.
there's like a video where he's talking about the gong,
Hmm.
but and he's giving certain direction.
I think you
But
told me about that video when we were in teacher training, actually, but I don't think I've ever seen it.
yeah, I mean, to me, the most important part of gong playing is listening. And I think that what was being, shown is maybe just somebody having a mallet in their hand and connecting it to the instrument, but not really considering the nuance. In fact, like they would say, like a lot of time, if you're looking too much at the nuanced aspect of the gong, that you're out of the space or something like that. But to me, it's
Mm-hmm.
a part of listening. I'm just trying to understand and work with what's happening from the instrument, work with the rhythms that are forming, listen to the different clusters of overtones and, be able to work with them in different ways.
Because you play quite gently, right? Most of the
Well,
time.
I use the full dynamic range based on, everything from silent to, uh, you know, like a train coming at you.
Mm,
But generally speaking, I'm not playing like a train is coming at you all that often.
right.
But I can.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's a part of. I've played the gong that loud. I think I've gotten quieter over the years. I had a teacher who
Haven't
and
we all?
friend. What's that?
Haven't we all?
Well,
Quieter.
I'd met this guy named Mitch Nerr, who I work with now in an online course called Dig Deeper. But Mitch makes you get like right in front of the gong, like put your ear like right on top of the
Mm-hmm.
gong and play it as quietly as you can, and hear like the first movements of the gong and what they sound like. And you're using a really small mallet. And he just had us do this like day after day after day. It was incredible ear training. Um, and it gave me a completely different perspective of the instrument. This was just a few years ago, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm still able to change. I'm still growing as a musician, and so it's like he showed me this element I mean, if I would step away like a foot from the gong, it would sound like the gong is not playing at all,
Mm-hmm.
and it made me really start tuning into some subtle aspects of the playing that I think I personally was missing at the time, and I've been teaching for a few years as well. I just hadn't done it that way before.
Mm-hmm.
Like I hadn't had that experience. It was probably even a deeper experience for me having not done it that way. Uh, and then, years and years after first starting to play the gong, be shown something else. That was really useful. So it opened up my dynamic range to go much quieter. And then I started to also understand like the subtlety of what happens in a silent room whenever something starts vibrating quietly, and how long that takes to build, and what happens whenever a person tunes into it and actively and attentively listens to it, or otherwise could be very easily tuned out.
Mm-hmm.
So there are these very subtle spaces, and I think as a facilitator, it allowed me even further subtlety in how I was working with the listeners, and how I was preparing them, and then what kind of soundscape I was going to present to them. So that was really useful. So my idea at this point is, to kind of create like a base level for what I consider to be like the comfortable volume, and then work below that for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and then like meet that space, and then come just a little bit above that, but not so much that it's actually, you know, going to be like truly loud, but it's actually psychologically louder than where the listener has
Mm-hmm.
been, and so it's perceived as being something really loud. But that sort of wall of fantasy that is created that this is loud, disappears if somebody like talks in the room, or if somebody coughs in the room, or something like that. It's just people are in such a deep listening space that it's like more frequencies, everything that comes along with the gongs and volume. I think it becomes more pronounced in that very deep listening space. Um, yeah, I feel like I sort of left something hanging there in the beginning. So, back to my path, I guess, away from Kundalini Yoga. And I mean, I got to say, like, I've used Kundalini Yoga to heal myself a number of times, and I still believe in doing it. Um, I don't think I'll ever teach it again. But there was like I thought I had left a few years ago, and then I had an infection in my body last year. I'd had or 2 years ago I had a stomach infection,
Hmm.
and and it kind of just ravaged me in a certain way. It was something, and then I had a tooth pulled, and that infection kind of just like moved and met,
Oh,
and I thought I was dying. Like I couldn't eat, and I was driving across the country actually,
oh
and I
wow.
just started chanting, and I was doing long drives. I was trying to get from California to Massachusetts, and probably shouldn't have been driving at all. Uh, and after all this chanting and the movement and all the changes that were going on, I think that I had this very, very deep energetic experience, and it's sort of like my body spasmed and moved in a way that, like, it had never really moved before, and I sweat like crazy, and I
Hmm.
released that infection, and then I just started practicing Kundalini Yoga again.
Hmm.
Because like I had so much energy moving in my body that like if I wasn't going to practice Kundalini Yoga, I think it would have given me. I mean, it honestly was a very neurotic time in my life now that I look back at it, but I think it would have been worse. So it definitely brought me back. So that gave me a different view of it, and because it was there for me when I really needed it.
Hmm.
Um, so it's like I'll always tell somebody to do breathing exercises if I see that they need to do breathing exercises. I'll always tell somebody to work on their spine if I think that they need to work on their spine. I mean, there's certain elements that like I've definitely learned from my own experience that have had great benefit on me. Um, so I'm grateful for that. I had heard a lot of stuff about Yogi Bhajan, I think, as I was touring, and coming from both ways that like there were lies, and then also
Hmm.
that it was true,
Hmm.
and somebody who had been in some kind of legal situation with Yogi Bhajan, told me that Yogi Bhajan would often sue people back and then have it sealed, or something to that effect, and so as I started looking at everything, a little bit closer, I saw that a lot of it was sealed, and that maybe it was for that reason.
Sealed
Uh,
means that there's no record.
well, like everybody signs like non-disclosure agreement,
Oh.
and it's not something on the public record necessarily. Like it's not something that I'm not sure
Yeah, yeah.
actually how it all works. I may be stepping out of my element and talking
I was
about.
going to ask you some other legal advice, but so I
Yeah, I
shouldn't.
don't. I'm not actually a lawyer. But a lot of it was just like hearsay. But in the environment that I had grown up with, and a lot of things that had happened to my mother, I think that I understood how cruel men can be,
Hmm.
and I didn't feel comfortable. I think like promoting him along with myself anymore. As grateful
Hmm.
as I am for some of what I learned, and I never met him. So I mean, it's sort of just like this abstract figure or TV character as far as I'm concerned. I mean, like
Hmm.
I've watched videos, and I mean, I know he was very real to a lot of people, but I'd never met him.
Do you think that if you had, you would have gotten involved?
I'm not sure.
I can
I
almost
think
say
it.
with certainty that I would not. Like if I had had to be the one to sort of translate what he was saying, because there was so much like um, coherent making, like editing going on, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean,
So
if you read his
yeah, if I had
lecture,
had like the raw unedited, I don't think I would have stuck around, especially if he had asked me to do like, send my kids to India or something like that. I would have been like, ciao.
Mm.
But as somebody who was not that present, whose teachings I enjoyed at the time, I think it was easier for me to get involved.
Yeah. I'd read a lot of his lectures. I mean, actually, I think that I'd printed out like 3,000 pages of lectures and read them. And this was before I'd done training.
Well, this is like
Um,
the unedited, like
yeah, it's just like straight,
okay, yeah.
I mean, he's all over the place. And it's very stream of consciousness. Uh, you know, he'd pick up certain lectures in different cities. He'd start talking about something and then continue to talk about it somewhere else. Um,
Do you know, I
yeah,
always just thought I wasn't smart enough to understand what he was saying,
well,
or like how it threaded to how pieced together.
I mean, I think that I'll say there are times in my life where I just start talking, and sometimes I say some really good stuff, but then sometimes I'm like, it's sort of, like the instrumental section or
Yeah.
something like that. It's like saying or like, but I'll have sometimes paragraphs of
Yeah,
that.
but you'd own up to it though, wouldn't you? You'd be like, yeah, they didn't all fit together, but I feel like he was like, no, that was all a continuous flow of genius, and you didn't get the thread. I don't know that was being said, but that was always the way that I understood it. Like there was some like, I don't know,
Well,
thread.
he got my mind thinking about a lot of things. But then as I started looking for deeper for answers in terms of what was prana and really we don't actually even know. I mean, like I got to the point where it was like I'm really talking to people and it's like it's okay that we don't actually know this yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's okay that there are elements of the psyche that we don't understand. It's okay that there are elements of biology and bioenergetics that we don't understand. And it's better to say that we don't understand it because then we can keep looking for it.
Right.
I mean, like I think that's the problem. For me, like Kundalini Research Institute should be researching this. I mean, like, there should be like
No, I
a room
know. I
full of
thought
people
about
with
that
like
too.
doing heart math and doing some kind of wiring in terms of what's happening in the brain. And I know they've done this a little bit, but it should be like has to be done over and over and over again. It can't just be like one person. That's not how science works.
Well, it's also, yeah, right. So the one person being Yogi Bhajan, because the research that they're doing is sort of a filing of the same information, right?
They're
It's like
researching him.
yeah, yeah. But
Yeah, but they're not
but
researching Kundalini.
but they're not finding much then, because I mean, did you read that paper that Philip DeSlip wrote about Mahan
Yeah, I read that.
Maharaja and Mahan Tantric?
Yeah,
I mean, that seemed like he actually researched it. That it was like footnoted, like he knew where the information was coming from.
yeah, yeah. An interesting paper. I mean, I feel like there's still probably more to the story, and I don't think that yoga was like as organized at that point as it is now, and sometimes he mentions just like going somewhere and learning a meditation from somebody. I mean, that's not like
Mm-hmm.
a book anywhere or anything like that. I mean, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from what I learned from Yogi Bhajan, really is like if you bring attention and do anything, you'll have an experience. So I could put my arms in any experience, any
Mm-hmm.
position, and sit with it for long enough breathing, and I'm gonna have some kind of experience of my
Mm-hmm.
arms being in that position and my consciousness, following suit. I mean, especially as he gets older and he starts, just giving these like exercises where he's like, hold up one finger for 3 hours.
Right.
I mean, like, well, it's interesting because, like, I mean, what happens? Like he said, his index finger. What happens if I hold up my pinky? So, I started trying stuff like that, just to see, what the difference was, or if there was a difference. And there's always a difference because I'm always different. It's like I have more information based on each experience I have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I mean, I think that I had stopped really talking about Yogi Bhajan, and I really tried to not say his name. I mean, there's like a very embarrassing period in my life, I think, from like maybe like 4 or 5 years, where it's like I'm still hanging out with yogis and still doing some of the yoga, but like I think I'd started just focusing more on the gong. And a lot of what I was doing, I think, was like helping people unlearn what they had heard about the gong.
Hmm.
And so it was like very useful from my perspective of like having listened to everything that was said about the gong within Kundalini yoga, and I have the experience and listen to people play at full volume and listen to people play erratically. Um, that was really useful because otherwise I don't know like if I was looking at it from purely like a musical perspective, um, I'm not sure what I would have thought, hearing people play like that.
Hmm.
And I think as I started to think about it as a musical instrument more, I think that those questions were also very important for me, to say like, oh, well, maybe it shouldn't be played that way. Um, and of course, I'd seen the gong being played in different ways, uh, even before Kundalini Yoga. So I knew that there was already like other variety. But it was interesting because there was almost like this is supposed to be a separation from a musical experience in terms of how the gong was approached. Like it was something else. It wasn't music in Shavasana.
Hmm.
It was like Shavasana with the gong, but it wasn't music. Is kind of what was being promoted.
Hmm. Or
And
a lot of times there would be music that played under it too.
sure, sure. Yeah, some people like that. Um, for me, it was like there's a lot of potential in the instrument. And I think there's a lot of potential for like learning and teaching around the instrument that because it's an instrument where you could look at it and learn about physics. You can look at it and learn about psychoacoustics. You could look at it and learn about psychology. You could look at it and learn about you know nerve endings and how the nervous system works and learn about what it's like to listen to a sound that fills up an entire space
Hmm.
acoustically. I mean, there was a lot there. There was a lot for me to explore beyond just the meditational, uh, you know, effects that it had. Um, that was like sort of included in it. It's also interesting to me that the gong used during shavasana after doing a bunch of kundalini yoga can completely make you disappear. I mean, it's so mixing it with a bunch of movement and breathing, and then listening to an instrument that has a broad spectrum of frequencies and pushes a lot of air around in the room, has a certain impact. I mean, that's still fascinating to me. You know, I just want people to have a wide view of the instrument. Because what I've seen propagated a lot is like a very narrow thinking around within the Kundalini community was very narrow thinking around the instrument, and really like a bunch of like you shouldn't do this. Like
Hmm.
it was like it has the most rules of any instrument that I've ever
Hmm.
experienced in my life, uh,
Well,
or
yeah,
proposed rules.
right. I mean, there were a lot of rules in general. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that there was a certain time, and I may have talked about this in the last session. I can't remember. I feel like I said this in the last year, but I think at first, like having certain things lined up and having some rules that was useful for me.
Yeah, it was for me too, for
I
sure.
had been doing like a lot of touring before that. I was, I'd spent like 4 years on tour, and then I started doing Kundalini yoga. I was introduced to Kundalini yoga while I was touring, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna get off tour and I'm gonna start doing Kundalini yoga. And then I met uh, Galina and went through our whole adventure together, and like that was certainly part of it. And got really into it enough that I made albums. I dedicated a lot of my music to the practice, and but I think also I had a lot of other musical needs that the Mantra albums weren't providing. I mean, they provided some, but I also wanted to make experimental music. I wanted to make
Hmm.
ambient music. I wanted to make soundscapes. I just had other interests, and so like I sort of had, I don't want to say a side hustle because like I see it all as being like a continuum of my music, but I was always doing other stuff,
Hmm.
um, and always just looking at the different potentials that different timbres provide, um, which I think led to my interest in like different gongs and different sizes of gongs and different alloys. Um, just a lot of I'm just pretty inquisitive, I guess. And the gong is very different than other instruments. Um, with like a string or with the voice, you're following the harmonic series, which is essentially you have like your lowest frequency, so we'll call that the fundamental, and then to get the overtones above that or the harmonics above that, you would simply multiply the fundamental by the next number. So the fundamental multiplied by 1 would be the fundamental, by 2 would be that's like the octave, but it would be the second harmonic, by 3 would be the third harmonic, up through whatever number you chose. And you can do that as very simple math. And I think there's something very inherent in that. But when you look at an instrument like a drum or like a gong or a bell, it actually follows a different series. It's very much based on. It doesn't follow the harmonic series. It follows like modes of vibration that are actually occurring within the instrument.
Hmm.
And so, an instrument has a certain amount of flexibility, a certain amount of rigidity, certain size. And so really what you're considering is like how sound is moving through the instrument and what sounds are coming out of the instrument. And so, with gongs, I think because it's always changing, it's not like the same sound over and over again. Like if I hit a string, there's only so many sounds that I can get out of a string. It's pretty predictive. With a gong, it's actually very much unpredictable, and then it changes very quickly. You can strike it somewhere else on the instrument, and that will excite it. So you're exciting physically a different part of the metal, but then different tones are coming out of the instrument because you've struck it there.
I guess I
Um,
hadn't really thought of that. So I mean, like, I just never thought of it. That seems really obvious, but you couldn't guarantee a particular tone, even if you knew exactly where on the gong to strike.
well, you could consider it's never going to be exactly the same. I can never do something exactly the same. I can do something almost the same.
Mm-hmm. But is it almost the same in the sense that like the violin yesterday is different than the violin today, or is it?
I think that it's in terms. So I've tried to compose with gongs, and
Mhm.
so like I have pieces that I've done, night after night, and I mean certainly there's feeling that comes along with it as well. Every song can be a little bit different, but in terms of because you have to get the exact amount of force.
Mm.
You have to get the exact location at the exact angle. But it's not like there are frequencies that and then your mallet is really important as well. So I mean there's so many different factors. So it's like I can put a bunch of that in place and do something similar, but I can't do it exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And also every room is going
Mm-hmm.
to make that instrument sound different. And and then also just like I'm a little bit different every time I strike it.
Mm-hmm.
Like what is going to be the same is like you'll see a similar bandwidth, but certain overtones will be louder or softer within that bandwidth. And so and I can use a small mallet and I'm not going to activate any of the lower tones, or if I use a larger mallet, I'm not going to activate a lot of the higher tones. Um, so there's a lot of different considerations, but then also if the gong is already vibrating, it's like you're kind of meeting, like you're distorting the instrument whenever you strike it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like here I'm distorting it at say like 3 o'clock, and then I'm distorting it somewhere at like 6 o'clock, just to kind of give us an idea of
Mm-hmm.
around. And it's like the gong is in motion when I'm striking it at 6 o'clock. So I don't know, it's sort of like wiggling in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
It almost looks like it's fluid. So you never know where it's going to be within its flex. A lot of times you could even stop the gong from vibrating. You can just like cancel that mode out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I can get it pretty close. And honestly, like the smaller the instrument, the easier it is to repeat. So like I've been doing a lot of pieces on like 5-inch gongs and 10-inch gongs lately, and those I can get to they're pretty repeatable. But what I'm trying to bring forth is more a melodic idea around the gong by playing smaller instruments than necessarily the than playing like something that's like very drony or with a large gong.
Yeah.
Uh,
Do you write this down in some form?
well, mostly I memorize things unless I need people to play them.
Okay. I was just
Then I
thinking that
record them.
notation would be really interesting to
Yeah,
see.
I've thought a lot about notating the gong, and I've been looking at how other people do it. With my students, I generally will kind of create some kind of story, and then follow like a storyline of some sort, and then we'll say these instruments are coming in at this part of the story, and they're played in this way, and it's done for like this long. And when you look at it, it's like a lot of scribbling, and is I'm trying to get people to compose very quickly. A lot of people have such hangups about composing or improvising or just music. Um, and a lot of people, the gong is their first instrument,
Mm.
and so they've never thought about writing a piece of music. And it's a lot of fun to write a piece of music, so to give somebody an opportunity to like very quickly, a lot of these pieces, like I'll write with people in like 5 minutes. It's like as quickly as I can write, and as long as everybody has like a part, you know, that's been really fun. And but I haven't been really specific with the notation. It's more like here's a concept you're going to play in like this kind of way,
Mhm.
or I'll give a certain stroke. Um, try not to have everybody playing at the same time necessarily, but it's been great. Like learning how to write for metal instruments has been one of the most rewarding experiences in my life. Um, it's and to share it with people, I think also has been great. I think I was in a place right before COVID hit where I was like really like I think I was like creating like a new history around the instrument or something like that. It was like a new mark in history around how the gong could be used.
Hmm.
Or at least is like how I was looking at it. In my own personal myth, I guess we can say that's true. I don't know in the rest of like history, and but I think that there are things happening with the gong right now, and not just with me, but with like a lot of people, that the instrument's just never been used in that way before. And there are more gongs now than there have ever been.
Hmm.
You know, so uh, yeah, it's kind of fascinating.
You're in
Um,
the Midwest right now, yeah?
I'm in Pittsburgh,
Pittsburgh.
or
Oh,
outside of Pittsburgh. Yeah, I'm in Pennsylvania.
so they're
Uh,
probably not, are they starting to open stuff up?
things are opening and closing. Uh, yeah, we've had a really big spike recently.
Hmm.
I think we went up like I think the highest was like 8% in the area or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was in Idaho and well, I had a whole incident, but I happened to be talking to this woman who was helping me find my phone that I had misplaced in the watermelons. Um, and she was like, I was like, I'm so sorry to, like hold you up. But she said, oh no, we're early. We're waiting to go see a play across the street. And I was like, wow, you guys the theater's open in
Yeah.
Idaho. But it just made me think that maybe in certain places, they would, although I don't know if it's the places that are the most excited about gongs, but I was
I've
wondering if
been, I've been asked to do events. I haven't done any.
you.
I, I was on tour whenever COVID happened, and I was in Florida, and actually was in a concert when I decided that I had to cancel my tour.
Mm.
And I came back to my parents' house in Pennsylvania. My father has multiple sclerosis. He's paraplegic.
Mm.
Um, it's. I mean, that was a crazy conversation to have to have with my parents. Like, hey, I might be killing you if I come home. I've just been in like 40 cities.
Oh, wow.
So. Uh, but I mean, everything was so crazy in March, at least from my view of it. I mean, I just didn't know what was happening. And I still don't really know what's happening.
No, although it's feeling more and more normal to like walk around and see everybody with face masks on, which I find really interesting psychologically. I'm like, yeah, this is what we do now, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm still kind of understanding the psychological impact. I've been very isolated. I mean, I'm around my family, but yeah, I've been pretty isolated,
Yeah.
and I just don't want to bring anything to my father. I think that whenever I decide that I'm going to start being social again is whenever I'll move out of this
Hmm.
house and I'll go somewhere else.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I'm still trying to understand, you know, I mean, it's interesting because I was on tour for like 6 years, and then it stopped. I mean,
Right.
in the midst of that tour, Galena and I divorced, and a lot of changes happened. We tried to settle in California, and that didn't work, and just a lot went on. Just touring for 6 years is insane. I mean, and so I think everything stopped, and then I was integrating that, and at the same time, I was integrating everything that was coming up about Yogi Bhajan, and it's been an interesting time just to look at what my life was. And like, I mean, I think it was beautiful and worth it at the time. But then I was so ambitious in how I wanted to share music with the world, and now I'm kind of like looking back. I'm like, wow, I missed out on some stuff because I was on the move. You know,
Yeah.
for years. I mean, like I have friends whose kids are like grown up now. I'm like, oh my god, I haven't seen them in so long. I was just in the van. um,
I think one would feel that way no matter what they chose to do, though, for 6 years, honestly.
yeah,
Like the people with the kids are like, God, what did I do with my life? The people without the kids are like, God, what did I do with my life?
yeah.
You
I guess we're all saying that, but I think that's an interesting, it's an interesting possibility if everybody's saying like, oh my god, what am I doing with my life, or what did I do with
Yeah.
my life?
Yeah.
Maybe,
Well,
maybe people will decide to do something different, or you know,
or just, I
not.
don't know. I think it just sort of comes with like understanding that you're never going to have every experience that it's possibly imaginable, but that the experience you're having is the best one for you right now. And you
Yeah,
can always choose to change it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of interesting towards, like I had thought that I was going to change my life. I was in this position where I was looking at the end of the tour.
Hmm.
I was trying to figure out where it was and how to have enough money to move somewhere and be comfortable and maybe not have to work for a while. And then it was sort of, thrusted upon me several months early.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at the time I kept saying all I need is a room and I'll just create, magic. And so, I have all the instruments set up in my mother's house. I have,
Well,
I
you
don't know, maybe
certainly have a room.
100 instruments in this room, and then there's probably like 40 in the room upstairs.
Wow.
And, 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 and I still have stuff in storage in California, but there's plenty here for me to
I still
explore.
have stuff in storage in New Mexico. I don't know
Yeah,
what I'm going to do with that.
I don't. It's my next thing is going to be what do I do with all of my other stuff? Because I'm
Yeah.
still paying on all this. If I have them ship it to the East Coast, it's going to be like $3,000. If
Sure.
I don't know if it's worth going back to the West Coast or not right now for me, but maybe. Hard to say.
If this all ended like right now and no one was at risk or whatever, everything opened up, do you think you would just go back on tour or would you do things a little differently?
I'm not ready to go back on tour right now, but yeah, I guess like the hypothetical doesn't work for me because I don't know where things where things are going to go. There's just so much happening in the U.S. right now, and
Well, do
also,
you want to?
do I want to go on tour? Not right now.
No. So
Uh,
it's good. It's funny. You're not the only person I've heard say like, "Oh wow, this happened at a really great time for me because I was really looking to slow down." That sort of thing.
yeah. I think that I had certain wants for this period of time that were great disappointments. Not to be able to explore and but at the same time, here I am, and for the first month, I think I was just, kind of like a deer in headlights. I couldn't like really use my imagination for a little bit. I mean, I was playing music, I think, this whole time, but like I couldn't see past just being in this basement. And then I don't know, a few weeks ago, I was playing these bell plates, and I decided I wanted to make my own bell plates. And so then I did all this math to create 4 octaves of bell plates, and which took a while. And it was sort of just like using my imagination in another way, like for something that didn't exist yet. Uh, it sort of opened things back up for me, and that was important. No, it's like I've also been teaching this course called Dig Deeper with Thomas Or Anderson and Mitch Nair.
Hmm.
And Thomas is a physicist and an incredible musician and sort of like a Taoist master, if that wasn't kind of an oxymoron. But and then Mitch Nair, who's also an amazing musician. He's a historian. He's an ethnomusicologist. The three of us have this class we've been doing 3 hours a week, 3 days a week. Excuse me, 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. Um, and just
Kind
about
of.
music, and some of it is about meditation, and some of it is about talk about touring. Some of it is about the science around how sound works. It's always changing. We're just digging, like we just like have an idea, and then like we dig into it.
So is this something that you sign up for, and you just are part of continually?
Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, we've done. I think we've done 3 seasons. We're about to start season 4 tomorrow,
Okay.
and so you can go back and get the past episodes, or you can just join us continually.
Oh, cool. So where do
And
you do that?
we do it on Zoom.
But how
And,
how do people sign up for it?
it's at digdeepersound.com.
Okay, I'll share that.
Yeah, and that's actually been, I think, one of my saving graces because Mitch and Thomas have me thinking all over the place. But just in terms of like what I'm going to do with my life, something came about whenever I was like, hey, I'm going to make metal bell plates. And so, I did all the math, and now I've been ordering the plates, and I need to drill the holes and sand them.
I don't
Uh,
even know what you're talking about. What is a
Bell
metal bell
plates
plate?
is it's like this instrument. It's like a flat plate.
Okay.
It's a
And
certain size.
it's just called a bell because it rings, not because it's shaped like one?
Yeah, but yeah, it's not shaped like a bell. It's a flat plate. They're also known as bilas.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
there are probably other names that I don't know, but
So
yeah, it's essentially a flat
to
plate.
make them a certain size to be at a certain note?
Yeah, so you have a ratio between the length and the width, and then also the thickness of the metal
Mm,
will matter. So the thicker the metal, the higher the tone.
mm,
Um, and so, but if the metal's too thin, then it flexes too much to get
mm.
a good tone. So right now I'm experimenting with all that, and I have some metal, and it's great because like I can just pick up the metal. It's just a raw piece of metal, but I know where the nodal point is, so like a place where it's not vibrating, and I can just like pick it up from that point and strike it, and the tone is there. It's like, man, I did that with math. Like I figured this out, and it worked. and so I'm really happy about that. So I can't wait to finish making these. Um, but with that, it just opened up this new pathway in my thinking, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to be in the basement forever. What am I going to do?
Sounds
So that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm
like those
trying to
bill
decide if
plates
I
are
want to
the
be near my family or if I want to be, in the country or if I want to be on the other side of the country.
yeah, but it sounds like those bill plates are the key to everything for you.
They could be. But it's just another way of looking at music and another way of looking at something that I love.
Yeah,
And and then I think also like brushing up on like math was really good for me right now.
yeah.
But it's a different part of my thinking. And and so I think just going through all these calculations and just like letting it, play out because I'm not just doing it for one note. And I was looking at like different thicknesses of metal, and then I wasn't even sure exactly what I was going to get. Like I knew that it was going to work in some way. Like I knew the intervals would be there, but I wasn't exactly sure what note it was going to start on
Hmm.
because like the thickness of the metal had a lot to do with that. So it's just like I chose this
Mm.
company because they used water jet cutting, and it was the easiest, and their website was easy to use.
They can
And
cut metal with water?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, it's a very clean cut as well. Um, I thought I was going to cut all this stuff myself, but then whenever I realized, as I was like, trying to order the metal, I was like, oh wait, they'll do it for me. That's way easier. So yeah, it's been nice, and they just called me today, and I think we'll have a good relationship with each other. We're excited. I don't know if I'm gonna make these for other people yet, but maybe
Ah,
I will. I just want to make sure that I can make them well enough for other people to have.
uh-huh.
I'm okay with things being a little scratched or not perfect, but whenever it goes towards selling, an instrument to somebody else, I want it to be a work of craftsmanship. So I'm not there yet, but my imagination is working towards that point. I mean, I think the last time we spoke, I had mentioned that I want to have a school,
Hmm.
and I think that's still true. Just a place for people to ponder music and learn about music and learn about sound, uh, and learn about how to really, bring music and listening into your life. I think I'd be happy if that's how
Do you
things end.
not do you not have that with that course that you're doing?
Well, I do, but I think in a place.
Oh, okay.
There's something. I mean,
Places might be passé, Mike.
I know, but that's my hope. I mean, so
Yeah,
like if everything was to like open up and like what you had said,
yeah.
what I would do would be create a space for people to come and explore music together.
Aw,
But yeah, I don't know if places are passe. I mean, I'm not sure how to live in that world yet.
no.
Um, I don't know that I want to do everything on the computer.
There's
But I also
definitely,
don't want to put anybody at harm or put myself at harm either. So it's kind of a waiting period, I think, for a lot of us.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still being artistic. I don't feel maybe the same impulsive need to share every single thing that I do the way that I used to.
Hmm.
But it's kind of like a time where like ideas are cooking a little bit. I think also with like a lot of the more melodic instruments, they're not as forgiving. Melodic gongs are not as forgiving. I can hit wrong notes. I could hit like one instrument way harder than I hit another instrument.
Hmm.
There's like a lot of fine tuning happening. I've been learning how to like play with two mallets in one hand, and so it's like wow, I'm like getting different parts of my hand to work in different ways. Like it doesn't just do that. Like, I actually have to like physically train myself to be able to hold two mallets with one hand, which lots of people can do. I'm learning everything from watching vibraphone players.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
or marimba players. But similar technique. But I didn't know that like a few weeks ago, and now I know how to do it.
Yeah.
So it's taking time, and I have the privilege right now to be with my family and you know not be completely broke.
Hmm.
Um, so the course has been good for that. Yeah, the course is a music school. I mean, we've been talking a lot about creating, a certification program once we hit like 200 hours of conversations that we've had, and then
Cool.
we'll see. Um, I mean, I think that's something that's come along with like, Yogi Bhajan's empire falling apart is just like my want or need for certifications or want or need to give them out or
Yeah, yeah.
you know it's made me think a lot. I'm still figuring out what it all means because I mean I don't think anybody would really I'd say a few people would really know me as just a Kundalini yoga teacher, but I think that most people wouldn't think
Hmm.
that necessarily in terms of the first thing that they would think about me. um, but still, I spent a lot of time. I dedicated a lot of time and energy to learning all that. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with it all. And even like what's true.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other.
I mean,
If you haven't listened to Shubid's podcast, it's called
uh,
The One with Shubid. And he has a two-part series where he talks to Philip to Slip about the history, not just the history of Kundalini yoga, but like the history of yoga in the United States.
uh,
Pretty fascinating. I don't know if
I
you
know a
already
little
know
bit
about
about
that.
it from like Pierre Bernard and some of the tantric stuff that was going on in the West Coast. And
Uh-huh.
I've read The Great Om, which is
Okay.
a
Well, so
fascinating book.
you might be familiar with some of it, but I found it really fascinating and how how the information or the spreading of information from Yogi Bhajan was sort of this like synergistic thing between what his students were expecting him to teach and what he knew
Hmm.
or what he wanted to teach. So it's a very interesting podcast. I will
Oh yeah, I'll check that out. But I
recommend
can
as well.
understand that. I mean, like a lot of my learning since becoming a teacher was, actually being able to accept what I don't know and then
Mm-hmm.
allowing people's questions to guide my learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been really useful for me. I mean, first off, to be able to admit that like I don't know everything. That like there's a lot that's out of my wheelhouse. But then I think it's also made me appreciate the people who do know things that I don't know.
Yeah.
And
And who
then being
still don't
able,
know everything.
yeah, I never will. I mean,
Yeah.
um, but I've been able to talk to physicists and talk to doctors and learn more about what's actually going on in these sorts of experiences, and then understand like what we don't actually know at
Yeah.
all. That like just like we don't understand as human beings yet. We don't have the enough technology to measure it, or enough brain power to even process what we're measuring.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot of dots that need connected. Um, but it's I don't know. I think that I'm more humble now than whenever I first started teaching. I think that I was kind of an asshole whenever I first started teaching Kundalini yoga. Like I think that like I sort of deemed it as like being this high path.
Well, maybe relative to who you are now, but I don't think I'd ever heard anybody call you an asshole, and I certainly didn't think you were one.
Well,
So
I think just in terms of maybe what was going on in my mind, and then
yeah, maybe.
I talked a little bit about judgment the last time we were together, but I think that maybe I was judging other yogas. I was teaching in a yoga
Oh
studio.
yeah,
There was
yeah,
like hot yoga going on, and it was just
for
like,
sure.
oh, like what they don't even do shavasana. They don't even meditate. What they It's like all of this shit talking in my head, and I feel like, man,
Well,
I could have spent my time actually talking to people and really getting to know them better,
yeah.
and
Hot
not.
yoga's awesome. I love hot yoga.
I have a hard time breathing in the hot yoga class, but
Yeah, well, that makes sense. They actually when I first started doing so it was Bikram at the time that I first started doing hot yoga, and they used those horrible carpets.
oh yeah,
And so every Bikram studio that I went into had like a very distinct smell of like dried up sweat,
oh yeah,
really kind of moldy. Ugh. But so now they have they have like a special flooring for them that they can easily mop up, and they're like a laminate or something.
uh-huh.
I'm so grateful for.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've
I haven't practiced in a couple months because
I've played in some Bikram
toast.
studios over the years, and I mean it's always super hot walking in there, and the gongs steam up, and I mean it's not a class; it's usually like after their class.
They cool
Yeah, that
down
was
the room.
wild. And then I've had almost like hallucinations playing gongs and Bikram Studios.
Did
Just
they not cool down the room for you?
yeah, but they got it to maybe into like the 80s.
Oh, okay. That's the temperature of my house for like 5 months of the year when I lived in Phoenix because we
Oh
were
yeah,
too cheap to pay for like the cooler AC. We'd keep it like 80 to 82 and have the
yeah,
fans going. Oh my
yeah. The
God.
air would just be like thick. The gong would be sweating.
But it was a dry heat, so
Oh yeah,
yeah.
this was more like a wet heat.
No, yeah, Bikram's humid.
Yeah, I think that I've grown up a lot, and I'm grateful. And honestly, it's like I'm grateful for all the teachers that I've had. I feel like they were hopefully doing their best. I don't think that anybody knowingly tried to pull one over on me. I hope not.
Hmm.
I've really only had like one truly negative experience with anyone in the community. Um,
Yeah,
so
same
it's
for
like
me. I had
everybody that's my friend, I still consider to be my friend. Like I just don't have to do the same thing as everybody. You
hmm
know. Um,
Yeah, I had so many wonderful, wonderful experiences. I mean, overall, it was a great journey. I just knew I couldn't stay in it anymore.
Yeah. There was, after I finished recording When the Music's On, I knew that I wasn't going to do another chanting album.
Hmm.
Um, and
Did you release your music as Harnaik before? Or no, it was always Crown of Eternity.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Uh, yeah, so it's been under my name and then Crown of Eternity and then Brother Ong. I was doing that for a
Okay.
while with like so I was playing the Shahi Baja and zither and doing like kind of like walls of effects and
Brother
different sounds as
Om.
well. Um, So yeah, and I didn't really use Harnick that much. At a certain point, it got so confusing because I wanted to keep my career going with Mike Tamburo and
Uh-huh. Oh, I
I
thought
didn't
you were
really,
gonna say because you guys both had the same name. That would be confusing to me.
yeah. I mean, sometimes it was. I mean, we never really called each other that.
Sure.
Uh, I mean, we actually had like kind of like sort of like a mishmash of like a Bulgarian term of endearment that we had called each other. Um, But yeah, I mean, at a certain point, I don't know, just like that fire to share it in that way. I think that like all of the mantras that I'd seen used in Kundalini Yoga, like the ones that I felt a connection to, those are the ones I recorded.
Yeah.
And and I hope that those recordings are really useful for people still. I mean, I made them with like so much heart and so much love, and I tried to put a lot of creativity. A lot of my idea behind the Kundalini is that it is meant to make us more creative
Hmm.
and meant to open us up in a different way. And I tried to make a music that supported that, that supported the experience and how consciousness changes over time and so I put a lot of love into those recordings.
Yeah.
And Galena did too. So I mean, I look at them as like gifts to the community. If they can be useful for people, I'm really grateful. I'm not embarrassed that I made mantra music or anything like that. I'm very much like it's an important part of my life. Um,
Hmm.
People have written me and told me that they had life-changing experiences around listening to some of those CDs, and so I mean that's really meaningful to me.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you know.
I concur, and they were beautiful albums.
But
I
I'm sorry.
go. Well, no, say what you were gonna say. I was
I
gonna
was just
say.
going to say, I've never wanted to make the same album over and over again. And so, if you look at my very large discography, you'll see certain threads running through, but there's always evolution,
Hmm.
and I can't imagine, if I'm gifted, more and more years, what kind of music I'll make from this day, forward. It keeps building.
Oh, I like that. Well, I like that as a place to close too.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being on my podcast again.
Yeah, my pleasure. I
Always
hope
a
I
pleasure to
explained
talk to you.
some of what we were talking about earlier. I
Yeah,
think,
well, it's always just sort of like the
yeah,
first step. It doesn't have to, you don't have to keep walking there.
yeah, it's a lot to process, though. just everything that's going on, all this information coming out, and I don't talk about it a lot, actually.
Hmm.
I've made like one friend that I talk to about all this stuff,
It's hard to talk about to people who aren't in it, who weren't in it,
yeah,
because it really is difficult to understand from the outside.
yeah. Well, and it's also difficult to understand where everybody is coming out in their own relationship to it.
Hmm.
And so sometimes it's like you can hurt somebody's feelings by saying the wrong thing,
Hmm.
and I don't really want to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm just kind of processing my own experience around this, and which I guess that's up to all of us.
Yeah.
I hope that it creates a really creative space for people.
Yeah.
And I hope it is freeing for people, because I don't think that you should go into a system where the purpose is to be creative, and to allow it to limit you.
Hmm.
And so at this point, if we can look at what we've learned from this, and allow us to think of new possibilities, and allow us to really consider, like, what do we is tradition even important to us? I think those are good questions. Anyway,
Excellent. All right. Have a great rest of your evening, I guess,
yeah,
where
thanks,
you
Sirgun.
are. Yeah.
All right.
Uh, so much love to you.
Yeah, you
Bye.
too. Take care.